think my focus is on the incremental change away from kind of focusing everything solely on capitalism. So I can recognize that if someone works hard, they deserve to earn an amount of money that provides them with I don't want to say luxury necessarily, but yeah, comfort. But if that comfort is coming at the expense of workers or the people that are below that person in the company, for example, it's worth questioning. And that's all I'm interested in doing at this point, is asking those questions and having people think them over. So whether or not we need the United States to shift away from capitalism in the 2024 election, I'm not the guy to answer that question. I don't have those answers.
Damn.
But sorry to disappoint.
You have the answers.
But I do think it's worth asking the questions of, okay, well, why is it that someone like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or whoever has hoarded so much wealth, has amassed so much capital to reach a point where they can own news outlets or they can own multiple billion-dollar companies and just be the figurehead behind them? I think a lot of the issues that we've mentioned so far, even when we talk about mainstream media and how it's kind of required to report a certain style of narrative or required to highlight a certain kind of narrative, a lot of that issue traces back, in my opinion, to capitalism. The fact that a lot of news is based on the amount of clicks or the amount of views that something might get. So in order to get those views, you have to be the first to report something, even if it's not verified.
Yeah.
That to me is a product of a capitalist system that's trickled down to reach our news and the way that we view the things that are happening day to day.
Views equal money.
That's right. So I don't think, from my perspective, at this point in my life, I can be anti-capitalist, of course, but I don't delude myself into thinking that I'm going to change capitalism as an ideology or as a dominating force in this country. But even operating within capitalism, there are things that you and I can do day to day that can help shift, like I said, that incremental change that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, Palestine and Israel, a lot of times people will mention BDS or the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement. And the whole purpose behind that is to be conscious and aware of where our money is going. So if we're going to operate within this capitalist system, we can at the very least, like the bare minimum we can do, is try and be aware of where our money is going and making sure that it's not funding things that we disagree with.
Right. Because a lot of the times we'll get taxed. I'm sure the working class, they look at their paycheck, they see that, hey, this hourly rate that I was guaranteed or signed, 30% of it is gone, 40% of it is gone. Some things are going into Social Security, some of it Medicare, but then there's this big chunk, federal tax, state tax, whatever it is. Then if you own property taxes, what is all that stuff going to? So I think the narrative that, especially on the Republican side or conservative side, is in general that, we should limit the government's abilities and shrink the government and therefore reduce the amount of taxes that people pay. Mm-hmm. But I think the problem is not with the taxes themselves, it's more so what it's going towards and then who's actually paying it. Yeah. Because what people don't realize is that, maybe these billionaires have amassed a lot of wealth, whether they started from the absolute bottom or they, were given, wealth early on.
A starter fund.
A small loan of $1 million. Whether that was essentially their path to success, how much taxes do they actually pay? And maybe if you look at it from a total dollar amount, it seems like a lot, but there's something called an effective tax rate that people don't realize. And at the end of the day, what is that effective tax rate? Why are some billionaires, why do they have lower effective tax rates than a lot of middle class or upper middle class folks? Yeah. And then what happens is that the upper class avoids paying the taxes for the lower class, and then the middle class, they pay the taxes for the lower class, and the upper class has essentially made the middle class enemies with the lower class and strive to be the upper class.
Right. I do think it's, again, when we talk about the kind of turning tide or the shifting tide, this is something that people are becoming more and more aware of. I think in the last probably 15 or 20 years, there has been more of a realization that, oh wow, like I've been working steadily, I've been working harder than ever before, And yet the amount of money that I'm taking home, it's not like it's gone up considerably or immensely. No, I'm still, living in the same place or driving the same car or able to afford just enough to get by. Why is that, right? Not just that, but beyond that, talking about where our taxes are going. I can pay, happily, I'll pay 20 or 30% taxes, but it would be nice if the schools were operational, if the roads were operational, if my healthcare was affordable. All of these things that you and I recognize are not the reality that we exist in.
Yeah.
So we can look at, right now it is particularly a flashpoint when we look at Israel, because we recognize this is the number one recipient of foreign aid. They're in the midst of a genocide against the Palestinian people, and we're the ones paying for it. We're the ones contributing our tax dollars to an ethnic cleansing campaign. For me, that's unacceptable, right? I would be, again, happy to pay taxes at whatever rate if I could have any kind of idea or say, any sense of transparency in where that money was going. But sadly, right now, we look at the city we live in or the healthcare costs that we're dealing with or the opportunities that exist in this country, and they're minimal and dwindling. Things are getting worse, despite what Joe Biden might try to tell you in a jobs report. We can look around and day to day recognize, oh, my grocery bill is more expensive than it was a year ago. Gas is more expensive than it was a year ago. Schools are worse off than they were a year ago. Meanwhile, we look at Israel and they're prepared to drop endless amounts of bombs and weaponry because that's what we're paying for. That's where our tax dollars are going. And whereas 20, 30 years ago, it might have been a fringe belief or kind of outlandish thought that, oh man, like my tax dollars are going towards that. I think nowadays people are really starting to come around to the concept that, oh, like this is exactly what we're doing. This is exactly what our money is going towards. So when Obama can sit on a podcast and comfortably say, we're all equally complicit, we're all responsible for what's happening, technically he might be right because of the way our tax dollars are funneled. But who made it that way? I certainly didn't choose where my tax dollars were going. Right. If I had a choice, they wouldn't be going there.